I bloody knew it. I sighed quietly to myself, picking up my phone to memorialize the event before quietly walking away. I expected to catch her in a lie, not what I got. There's no coming back from this. We won't survive this. Tracy, nominative determinism in all its glory. I should have been smarter before I married a blonde whose name ends in I. People who give their children stripper names are not trying to instill in them a firm moral view of the world. She arrived home more than an hour after I did, and as usual, joyfully exclaimed, "Hi," and flew through the door as if she was afraid the butter would melt. I was half-eyed watching one of those game shows that show as much skill as a game of snakes and ladders, and was immersed in my own thoughts. I wasn't paying attention to her, and she didn't notice it. Lost in her own world of stupidity, which has become the norm in recent weeks. While the game show host was mumbling about the amazing prize she was offering, I heard Tracy toss her purse onto the kitchen table with a careless clatter. In 1 month. Motherfucker. It worked fast. By my calculations, in less than 4 weeks, she'd cheated on me with him. I watched in the background, first with concern, then with rage, and then finally with humility, curious to see how things would develop further until I got tired of waiting for the other shoe to drop. It was the week I decided it was time for both of us to figure things out a bit before I opened the final curtain on this whole stupid charade, not counting the fact that she'd only been at her new job for 2 months. I had joked about it with her with a laugh when she took the position. The old stereotype of secretaries sleeping with their bosses, working as a paralegal at a mid-sized law firm, meant we had the opportunity to watch office squabbles and laugh about people having sex behind closed doors. Yes, I made her promise to keep me in the loop on office gossip. I put on a business-like demeanor. It's time for my sales experience to pay off. Never challenge their beliefs and prejudices. Some drunken executive starts blabbing about screwing his wife's sister. You respond with, "You dirty dog," or something to that effect. Do you think they start spouting disgusting racist, sexist, or homophobic nonsense? They don't. They don't even blink. They smile, nod, change the subject. "Has there been any new gossip in the office lately?" I asked loudly, turning my head toward the kitchen. "No, not that I know of anyway," Tracy answered, walking into the living room. "It's mostly paperwork, meetings, and research, not non-stop watching a Mexican telenovela." "Oh, come on. I know you've only been there for like 7 weeks. But this office has a very cool power structure. Stupid secretaries sleeping with their married bosses is a stereotype for a reason," I stated, noticing the slight hesitation in her response. I turned around to disarm her. "What about that girl? What's her name, Stephanie? Didn't you say that she seemed to be having a thing with one of the junior partners?" "No. It turned out to be nothing," she replied, plopping down on the other end of the couch in her white blouse and pencil skirt, and stretching out her stockinged legs. "If anything, it was very modest. Turns out she has a boyfriend. Can't stop talking about him. She's in love with him." I looked at her, raising an eyebrow. The blouse was translucent, tight-fitting, and had a noticeable neckline. It had started 2 weeks ago. I'd noticed that her outfits had become much more tight. That, as well as the change from ballet flats to heels and the slightly raised hemline. In hindsight, I realized this was obvious, but at first I thought she was just relaxing a bit, getting used to the dress code. That's normal when starting a new job. It's better to be overly formal initially and adjust to the atmosphere than to dress too modestly and make a bad impression. Oh well, it's probably for the best. After all, there's a reason they say you can't crap where you eat, I added. It's a shame for you and me, though. What do you mean? She asked with a smirk. Meaning what? About you being wrong or about the shame? I asked, watching her frown out of the corner of my eye. Well, both, I suppose. I fucked her. It's time to turn the screw. Well, it's a nice little trap for naive fools, isn't it? But on the other hand, it's fun to watch from a safe distance as it happens to some stupid, gullible bitch. or in my case, to hear about it, at least in a macabre way, watching the real-time fallout of the office romance bingo card and all that. "A trap?" she interjected. I nodded, still pretending to watch TV. "Oh yeah, it's a really bad movie. The boss goes all out, using the techniques of a pickup artist, acting like a peacock and talking about himself, complimenting the stupid girl and gently invading her personal space. Maybe has a few for the best dating drinks after work, says some nasty things about her current partner, and suddenly he's all over her and she belongs to him. It's a deal with the devil." "I don't understand how it's she belongs to him," Trace said quietly but firmly. "It sounds like a regular office affair." "Well, think about it. I mean, take your boss, at least senior partner. James, what's his name?" An awkward pause ensued before she finally answered, "McMasters," as if she had mysteriously forgotten her boss's last name. "Okay, you said old Jimmy's married with kids, right? So if he's traipsing around, he'd probably say their marriage is on the rocks. Would describe his grumpy, nagging wife who doesn't appreciate him," I said, wagging my finger, mimicking an angry housewife. "Of course it's all lies. He would never leave his wife. He's just trying to get into some naive slut's panties," I said meaningfully, hinting at some of the lines he probably used. Judging by the way she tensed up awkwardly, it was a big hit. "Theoretically, I mean," I added. "I know you'd tell me all about his horrible family life if he tried it on you after all my requests for hot gossip." I paused. Her silence spoke volumes. "I mean, that's why I keep asking about it. My job is to throw frat parties. Half the guys spend their free time flirting with our middle-aged secretary, Olivia. Except for a few brave, deluded fools who stand up for the boss's wife, they're always bragging to me about this smutty shit. It's all beer and hotties and sports. It makes me sick." "Yeah, you said," she added dismissively, referring to her usual reaction to the shit I hear every day. She gritted her teeth. "I wouldn't have liked it there." "But that means I had a master class in scum-sniffing tactics," I smirked at her. "Anyway, where was I? Oh, yeah. Once she spreads her legs for him, what happens next? She's a liability, a threat to both his job and his marriage. A smart lawyer like him wouldn't pull anything. He'll either forge some paperwork to prove poor performance, or yes, more likely, he'll just do it out in the open. Explain to the poor gullible slut that you need to keep up appearances so no one sees you have favorites, and get her to sign the application, then sleep with her at the same damn meeting." I noticed her flinch slightly beside me. Another palpable thump. What kind of stupid bitch could she be? Well, lustfulness and stupidity have been known to go hand in hand. Finally, she said, "That sounds, a bit of a stretch." "Yeah, Machiavellian. Anyway, work and fun are two different things. Why would he bother?" "Ah, but don't you realize that means he could fire her for cause, kick her out at any time, and no one would question it. Now she's just a disgruntled employee spreading lies to cause trouble. What do you think will happen the second she tries to end it?" "I don't know. It seems a little ridiculous. I don't think anyone is that calculating and cynical." "A senior partner who isn't calculating and cynical? How do you think you can get a senior partner to work honestly and stick to principles? It's all politics and backstabbing." "If you don't want to believe it, that's fine. Either way, one of three things is happening." "One," I announced, looking her in the eye and raising my index finger. "Fired without warning, and there's a dark cloud hanging over her. Career over." "Two," I raised a second finger. "She fails and he fails her. She bores him and then bam, she's fired again for cause." "And finally, the third option." I voiced the last phrase with an evil grin. "She wises up and adopts the missionary position while she herself is looking for a job elsewhere. Either way, she's either a willy-nilly sex slave or a loser. Screwed up, literally or figuratively." Was all she could say to that unpleasant truth. So, yeah, it's grim, But that's the reality. And that's why all the big companies have anti-brotherhood policies these days. Heck, it's why the military is so tough on adultery. I've heard some people like it, though. If I remember correctly, it's a BDSM game called Power Play. Well, she said after a long pause, her voice barely louder than a whisper. Like I told you before, there's nothing like that going on. I chuckled briefly and finally added, like I said, it's a shame. It would be fun to hear second-hand details. What did you say there? Oh yeah, like a telenovela. I'm starved for drama. I'll leave it at that for now. An ugly little lump of raw, horrible truth for her to digest while I contemplate my next move. That night we both lay in bed with our backs to each other, miles apart. I was radiating anger and hatred, and I'm surprised she didn't feel it. I certainly felt her newfound guilt and insecurity. Sleep came slowly, and I could tell the same was true for her, and I think she stared into the darkness for a long time that night, trapped by her own choices. She didn't know it then, but it was her last chance. Perhaps one well-chosen word would have sufficed, something with remorse, regret, or even an expression of love, an expression of remorse, something tangible. But no, she said nothing. I knew that by morning she'd be able to minimize what I'd said because the alternative was too real and too terrifying. But I also knew it would take away her luster, and based on her previous reactions, the potential consequences I'd predicted would haunt her. She would be left with the silly idea that she had some decision to make, when nothing else depended on her. The next day, her modest outfit was far from foolproof. Too little, too late, my love. It's just playing hard to get. You'll convince yourself it worked, and you'll be back at it in a day or so. Heck, he'd probably enjoy talking you into rekindling the affair, but he wouldn't have to try very hard. Things change quickly, though. They wouldn't have time for that. I went back to being the loving, oblivious husband, but 2 hours later, I was already ringing the doorbell with an envelope in my hand. The door was opened by an attractive and unprostitute-like woman who answered. Yes? To my Mrs. Weston? I'm afraid it looks like your husband may have to fire his assistant again. And I handed her the envelope. Before I said goodbye, I added, I don't know how you're handling this, ma'am. These things can't be treated kindly, and she's not my concern. It was harsh, but I'm sure the poor woman with the sagging jaw realized what I was implying, because a moment later her expression hardened and her hand gripped the paper tighter. All this was another reason to assume that it wasn't the first time. He had acted too quickly and smoothly. He'd probably been targeting Tracy from the very first interview. When I glanced around before starting the car, Mrs. Weston had pulled out the photograph and was looking at it with a grim expression. The sight of her loving husband kissing my loving wife over his desk was impressive. This day, Tracy came home early and looked visibly unhappy. And me? Why should I be unhappy? We had no children. Our finances were different, and the apartment was rented month to month. I spent a couple hours packing up the rest of my life and loading it into the car. By the time the alarm went off on my phone, I was already sitting in Davy's kitchen complaining to his pregnant wife, Alyssa, about my soon-to-be ex. They said I could lie on an air mattress in their nursery for a month or two. There was a pretty strict time limit for that. But I was very grateful for their charity, and that would be enough. We were watching Tracy together on my phone, her walk of shame, when I received a notification from the CCTV camera on our door. Tracy wanted to buy one of those smart security systems marketed for paranoia disguised as convenience, but I didn't argue about it. I have to admit, it came in handy now. She sat in the driveway for a full 5 minutes before getting out of the car. When she finally got out, she moved slowly, slouching and keeping her head low, shuffling toward the front door like a delinquent drunk. She paused for a moment before pulling a key out of her purse. I think she was probably expecting an "I told you so" kind of greeting. Then again, she certainly had her doubts when she left for work, so she probably knew I was aware of her intentions. After that, she no longer looked surprised as she walked through the living room and over to the picture taped to the wall. She just stood there and stared at it dumbly before eventually wandering away. Alyssa had been clucking like a witch the whole time, accompanying her words with mocking comments that made me feel a little better. It was obvious how events were roughly unfolding, and I felt a slight pang of smugness over my prediction from yesterday. I never found out how Weston and his poor wife were doing, because I never asked. I didn't care. Why should I think about it? It was Mrs. Weston's cross to bear. I found a new place to live fairly quickly and just as quickly furnished it according to the aesthetics of a single bachelor. The secret was low standards. I dove headfirst into work. Pestered my friends to spend more time with me than usual. All the usual stuff. In the end, I still missed her in the wee hours of the morning when sleep eluded me. But in the light of day, I always realized that I had tried my best and spent more time and effort on her than I should have. I'm sure I have my faults as a partner, but I didn't deserve what I got in return. At least I was able to escape with what remains of my pride and self-respect intact. Eventually, after about a month, I did talk to her privately, but it wasn't for her or myself. I'm of the opinion that forgiveness is reserved for grieving relatives, not cheating whores. So this conversation was only for the sake of her parents, my father-in-law and mother-in-law. They'd always been good to me, and while she hadn't told them exactly what had happened, they both quickly pieced together the facts that she'd lost her husband and her job on the same day and decided they didn't need more information. But they wanted me to talk to her in person, to meet face to face and at least end things properly. Get her to move on. It still hurt, but I agreed for their sake. At their house, her father greeted me warmly but sadly at the front door and ushered me into the dining room before disappearing. She looked depressed. She had an earthy complexion, baggy sweatpants and t-shirt, and a sad frown. We sat across the table from each other in silence for a long time before she finally began. "It's almost exactly as you predicted," Tracy said, not taking her eyes off her hands on the wooden tabletop. "I ruined everything, didn't I?" "What do you think?" I snapped at her before pulling myself together and starting again. "Look, the second you slept with him, it was over between us. You should have known that." She tried to defend herself, but even after a month, the best she had was this. "I didn't do it. I didn't mean to—" "Oh, please," I interrupted her more calmly than she deserved. "Don't. Do us both a favor and don't look for excuses. Some part of you must have understood. You dropped your panties so fast it was like you were in a race in the sex Olympics. Your poor lonely little Jim talked you down so fast, I'm surprised he had time to get up." I shook my head. "Anyway, you only lasted 3 or 4 weeks, and I didn't catch you right away because I thought we were stronger than that. I was more confident in us than I should have been. You might as well have sent me the pictures yourself. It was obvious. You're terrible at deception. Well, when it comes to pretending, you talk too much. You should stay honest. I thought we were stronger than that, too. It was just something exciting. Things got out of control, and I've been good to you, you know," I interrupted. "I had plans, feasible revenge fantasies. I could make the ending much more exciting than it actually was. I even seriously considered taking away your birth control. I had it all in my hands." Her eyes widened at the thought. "Your sex drive at home dropped pretty quickly, so I figured you wouldn't even notice if I posed as a happy celibate roommate for a few months. I'd have to file divorce papers in the maternity ward, but instead, until the very end, even though I hated you for what you were doing to me, to us, I gave you a way out. Everything she said was, I was going to end it." "No, you weren't," I said in a hard tone. "Maybe that's what you told yourself, maybe a few times, but it's a lie." "No, I really was going to. I knew it was wrong, and I really knew what I was doing was wrong," she said, looking at me with sad, squinted eyes. "I saw you. You didn't have an "it's over" expression on your face in his office. I'd already realized you'd slept with him, but when I saw that, I just wanted to catch you in a big lie, something specific I could point to. I didn't really expect to see what I saw. I'm sorry you saw it. She looked away. It was just physical. Please understand at least that. It's just another one of those, untruths that people tell themselves. If it was just physical attraction, you'd be cheating on me with an imitator. How does it feel to have a little juicy secret? Thinking you have something over me? Thinking he doesn't know? And looking at me and still feeling it inside me? Knowing that you know something I don't? Her eyes widened, and I think she recognized something unpleasant about herself that she hadn't noticed before. Well, I tried to give you a chance anyway, even knowing all that. Even after I told you how it was going to end. I know it threw you off, but if you'd admitted it right then, put yourself at my mercy, I might have been willing to try. You knew right then, didn't you? But at that point, it would have been a Hail Mary. I don't think I could have done it by then, even if I'd wanted to. Not after seeing this. Is there really no chance? She asked with a pleading look. Honestly, there was no hope in her eyes, but I guess she had to ask, just to make sure. No, I answered sadly. Good, was her only answer. She lowered her head again. After a moment, she muttered to the floor. I should have asked. I'm sorry, you know. I'm sorry for all of this, for every second of it. I don't know what was happening to me then. It was like I went crazy, like I was in another reality. But I want you to know that I'm sorry. She looked at me with wide, pain-filled eyes. I know it doesn't mean anything because I can't take it back. But I'm sorry. And that was the end of it. I went to say goodbye to her parents afterward, and her mother looked at me hopefully, as if we could make up. She asked if I would stay for dinner. I think her father knew I wasn't. He shook his head gently, not even waiting for me to apologize. Nothing could somehow magically heal the wound Tracy had inflicted on our marriage. Her father said, "Thank you for supporting us. Good luck." We agreed to a simple, uncontested divorce over irreconcilable differences. There was no point in dragging it out. We had no significant assets worth fighting about, and no reason to be in the same room with her again. About 6 months after that, I saw her behind the checkout counter at the grocery store. She looked thinner, but healthier, and certainly happier than when we last talked. Frankly, I was surprised. She has a degree. She could just cross that job off her resume and move. Start over somewhere else with a clean slate. I think making suboptimal life decisions may be a habit of hers that I hadn't noticed until now. Heck, maybe I was one of them myself. It must suck to be her. As for me, I was pretty much over her emotionally by that point. I had a good job, a promising new girlfriend, and most importantly, I was divorced.